mother's love liberates. It doesn't just hold. That is ego. Maya Angelou. By the age of 49, nearly 85% of women will be mothers to a child who, like Maya Angelou said, ought to be able to grow into their fullest, liberated selves. A mother's love, in its ideal form, doesn't bind, it doesn't stifle. It appreciates and encourages self-discovery, independence, and dignity. It can be your stepping stone into the world. Unfortunately, something that is very apparent in our modern times is that parental estrangement is on the rise, which, for me, tells us something important. A lot of parents ain't shit. A lot of parents allow their egos to triumph over love and care. A lot of parents probably shouldn't be parents, at least not when they become parents. But most of the time, these parents are lucky. They're lucky that the world doesn't see their parenting, doesn't see the egotistical love, or rather abuse they subject their children to. But sometimes their ego induces them to seek out celebrity, to seek out the red carpet, or post this egotistical love online. Now, the story I'm about to tell you is a crucial and quintessential example of how parenting can make or truly break a child. It's a crucial example of how so many of our societal issues stem directly from bad parenting, and that this issue of bad parenting just isn't a conversation that people want to have because so many people want to believe they're a good parent. And there's so much stigma around being a bad parent, so nobody talks honestly about it, and the harrowing cycle continues. Our subject matter is an example of how relentlessly destructive generational trauma can be if that cycle of trauma isn't broken. And unfortunately, Venus Angelic's story and where she is now is a cautionary tale of what happens when children are systematically failed in the age of the internet. Now, before starting this video, I am going to add this disclaimer, mainly because Venus Angelic's mother, Margaret, whose public-facing online life we are going to dive very deeply into, has a history of deeming public critique as targeted harassment and copyright infringement. All information included in this video is public information and is protected under fair use laws and clauses. This video is in absolutely no way targeted harassment, copyright infringing, or defamatory. This video is entirely transformative. Everything detailed in this video is corroborated with evidence publicly sourced and referenced. I do not condone reaching out to anybody mentioned in this video. Please respectfully keep all comments to my comment section below.
I'm gonna show it to you in front of all the people. Because you know why? Because I love you.
Venus Isabel Palermo was born on February 8, 1997 in Switzerland to a Hungarian mother and a Swiss father. It seems that her early childhood was spent in Switzerland, and at the age of 6, she would appear as an extra in a Swiss comedy film called Ready Steady Charlie. Venus is known for the many languages she speaks, and as such, for her very distinct accent. She grew up speaking German and Swiss German. She can speak Spanish, Dutch, Japanese, Korean, and English. She would only start speaking English at the age of 12 in high school, and it was largely due to her starting YouTube that she and her mother decided that if she wanted to reach wider audiences, she'd have to speak in English. Venus begged her mother to start a YouTube channel in order to start uploading videos of herself dancing to J-pop songs, and eventually, at the age of 13, Venus's mother allowed her to start making YouTube videos. At the time, Venus and her mother were living in the Spanish Canary Islands and immigrated to London when Venus was 14 years old. Venus would post about this on her blog, writing, "Yes, I flied together with my mummy by aeroplane to the UK, England, London on the 3rd of November with the help of the second place prize money which I won at the Lottie Fitz dance contest in 2011. And when I read this, I thought, gosh, a 14-year-old paying for her and her mother to immigrate from money she won in a Japanese chewing gum dance contest. That's not right. But nonetheless, the two made it to London, where Venus continued uploading videos to YouTube and quite quickly began to gain a following. Now, Venus was what you would call a Japanophile, which derogatorily and colloquially is called weeboo or weeb. This refers to a non-Japanese person who is obsessed with what tends to be a stereotype or tokenistic view of Japanese culture and people. This obsession is so great that the Japanophile effectively ends up denouncing their own racial and cultural identity in pursuit of Japanese culture and racial identification. Think Ollie London and his career failure before he started his equally tragic far-right grift. Now, Venus initially started her channel uploading videos of her dancing to J-pop and essentially trying to emulate the moves and mannerisms of what is known as Japanese idols. Japanese idols are entertainers who, oftentimes from childhood, are manufactured and marketed for their attractiveness, their personality, and their general stage presence. Idol culture really demonstrates an idol's journey into idolism, and this this journey is very fan-based, it's very disciplined, and about having a resilient work ethic, not just as an entertainer, but as a human being. Idol culture is rather controversial, especially because of the inclusion of junior idols, who are all underage girls that go through this kind of extensive marketing, this tireless training, and emphasis on building parasocial relationships with fans, many of whom are adult men. Now, for a variety of reasons that we're going to get into, Japanese idol culture was huge among young, specifically white European and American girls online. Hundreds of thousands of these girls wanted nothing more than to be junior idols in Japan, and Venus Palermo was one of them. This was a very different time to be on the internet. Venus's aspirations very much fit into the world of an aspiring junior idol. She was obsessed with Japanese culture, she had a resilient work ethic when it came to her channel and building a bond with her fans, and she, like many Japanophiles, had aspirations of one day living in Japan. Venus's fans were called Angelics, and she often hosted meet and greets with an emphasis on building her parasocial relationship to them. Now, it was clear, pretty much from her first few uploads, that Venus caught the attention of the algorithm and viewers. Her channel immediately gained traction, and people were enchanted by her very distinctive look and kawaii, cutesy personality. Her channel would go incredibly viral with the upload of a video in 2012 that now has over 60 million views. The video, titled How to Look Like a Doll, was a makeup tutorial and was very much in line with an online trend which a then 15-year-old Venus was at the forefront of. Living dolls and the living doll aesthetic were very, very popular on YouTube during the early to mid 2010s. Anastasia Spagna is a makeup artist who went viral for her doll makeup tutorials. Valeria Lukianova was known as the Ukrainian Barbie doll. Dakota Rose was dubbed the real-life Barbie doll and is now a Tokyo-based model. Taylor R. and Andressa Damiani were also famous living doll YouTubers, as well as Angelica Kenova. And of course, Venus Angelic became perhaps the most well-recognized of them all. These living dolls were all in bitter competition with one another for the ultimate living doll status, especially when it came to their numerous appearances on talk shows and the mainstream media. Their appearances on mainstream television essentially became a humiliation ritual. They'd appear on shows, usually accompanied by their respective mom-agers, and would be berated, laughed at, and derided as spectacles in mental illness, literally. However, online, the entire ambiance around these living dolls was inaccessible, popular girl at high school, and that very much speaks to the essence of their branding. I think there were an amalgamation of things behind this Barbie/living doll trend, but I'd say in crude terms that the early 2010s were defined by one important development, and that development was the proliferation and advancement of smartphone technology, which suddenly brought social media apps into the picture. Suddenly, you could easily and seamlessly watch YouTube on your phone without delay or parental oversight. And as a result, social media platforms like YouTube boomed in popularity, especially with children and teens. The early 2010s were also defined by an obsession with full coverage makeup looks, and consequently, an obsession with unrealistic beauty standards and makeup overconsumption became the toxic norm, especially on YouTube. That living dolls became popular among girls and teen girls with their excessive makeup and cosmetic procedures, with their overweight and doll-like bodies, as well as their it girl online personas, is absolutely no surprise to me. Unlike many other living dolls at the time, it's important to note that Venus didn't decide to become a living doll. In fact, she was labeled this in her real life from the age of 11 and was eventually dubbed this by the internet due to her distinctive facial features and particular makeup looks. According to Venus, people started calling her a living doll because she naturally looked like one. And in telling us this, Venus would also reveal something else. She would tell us that her mother actually taught her how to do her makeup in a more doll-like way. Venus's mother was born Margaret Palermo, and interestingly enough, she is as famous as her daughter, but for all the wrong reasons. And we need to preface Margaret before we truly get into the nitty-gritty of this video.
Hi guys!
Hey Angelic!
This is our thank you video.
Margaret/Margot Palermo is an intriguing individual, and the thing with Margaret is that, in my opinion, Margaret sees herself in one way and the world sees her in a very different way. And because of this, Margaret is constantly at war with the world. According to Margaret, she is an entirely logical and practical woman who, against her will, is forced to live among illogic and impracticality. The world refuses to understand her her, and as such, she is a victim of our lack of logical and practical understanding. Based on my own personal experience with these kinds of people, there is absolutely nothing you as the world can do for them. The more you point out their illogic, their impracticalities, and the harm that they're doing, the more adamant they become in their self-righteousness. In short, they have to help themselves, which means taking the first and most difficult step in admitting that it isn't the world that's against them. In fact, they are in a perpetual battle with the world. They are in a perpetual battle with themselves, and they are the root of all their problems. Only then can they find the help that they need, but until then, they can't be helped. Margaret has hundreds, and I mean hundreds, of pages documenting her antics on the various locale and archival forums. You see, Margaret was Venus's mom-ager, and she took this role very, very seriously. I mean, what 14-year-old uses her dance competition prize money to fund her family's immigration? Born in Hungary, Margaret Palermo would meet Venus's father in Switzerland while he was her boss. According to Venus's aunt, Margaret allegedly intentionally got pregnant in a bid to baby trap Venus's father. And Venus wasn't even a year old when a then 22-year-old Margaret would marry Venus's 31-year-old father. Margaret claimed that he had schizoid personality and that she only married him because she got pregnant. Based on Margaret's own testimonies on Instagram, her childhood wasn't an easy one. She grew up under communism, she had to wear large glasses, and she usually had her head in a book and doesn't seem to have done much socializing. She claims to have grown up with an abusive father and a manipulative gold-digging sister who would suck up her father in a bid to inherit his fortune. According to Margaret, as a child in primary and secondary school, people would say that she looked like a doll, but that because there was no social media, she never had the opportunity to go viral and become famous. Fortunately, her daughter Venus would inherit her doll-like features, and as such, this offered Margaret an opportunity that is all too common with stage moms who live vicariously through their children. I'd say that the numerous controversies Venus found herself in really pointed many fans to speculating that Margaret, not Venus, was the true brand and voice behind Venus Angelic. There were some rather weird posts made to Venus's Instagram. For instance, this post of Margaret asleep captioned, "I'm so obsessed with my mom's cuteness. Look, here she's sleeping." And then tagging Margaret's Instagram was considered odd, especially for a teen. And it was pretty noticeable that every few posts nestled in between pictures of Venus were pictures of Venus and Margaret, or just Margaret, which always made sure to tag Margaret's Instagram, referring to the duo as besties or my beautiful mum. And although this was peculiar, this really didn't raise as many concerns as would the various public feuds and instances of bullying Margaret and Venus would be involved in. You see, the Living Doll community was, in all seriousness, a very competitive and cutthroat one. I think this had to do with the opportunities the Living Doll brand offered to many of its creators, who I noticed almost all came from Eastern European or so-called small-town ordinary communities. As I said, they'd all vie against each other to be featured on national and even international television, and this seemed to have a lot to do with the dream they were all chasing, a dream of leaving their ordinary, humble beginnings and becoming this new kind of e-celebrity which promised fame, wealth, and an acceptance of who they really were. An acceptance they likely didn't find in their local, real-world communities. I mean, most people aren't dressing like dolls or wearing Lolita creations, and yet online, it felt like every young woman and girl was, or at least wanted to. But of course, there isn't enough room for everybody, and there isn't enough hard, stupid amounts of money going around for everybody. Because a lot of these living dolls and Lolitas wanted more than anything to break into the even more cutthroat world of Japanese idol culture, drama was rampant. Venus and her mother were at the helm of this drama. Now, Venus had 3 notable run-ins with fellow content creators: a then British J-pop idol called Kimono Time, YouTuber Xiao, and living doll YouTuber Anastasia Spagna. What all these run-ins had in common was Margaret's accusation that all 3 of these content creators were fame suckers. Kimono Time had left some fan comments on Venus's channel, asking her to check out her own smaller channel due to their common interests. Kimono Time had even defended Venus on a makeup tutorial video where she was receiving an unusually large amount of hate, and yet her supportive comments were deleted, and she was subsequently blocked from Venus's channel. Kimono Time then attended a Japanese convention in London that Venus was going to be at, and at this convention, Kimono Time approached Venus, excited to be meeting a creator she clearly looked up to. However, Venus was distant, uncomfortable, and seemed almost disgusted by her. Allegedly, Margaret noticed the two talking and swiftly, very publicly dragged Venus away from kimono time on 2 occasions during the event. This became a whole whirlwind of controversy within the Lolita community, and the internet started to see Margaret's true colors after kimono time, who apologized for the whole situation, was being bombarded with hate from Venus's fans and, importantly, directly from Margaret herself. Margaret, and Venus by proxy, essentially accused kimono time of copying Venus. Their evidence? Kimono time wore a blonde wig in some of her videos, and Venus wore blonde wigs. Kimono time was a J-pop dancer, entertainer, and aspiring idol, and so was Venus. Margaret would proceed to write lengthy diatribes to kimono time, calling her a crooked, dishonest liar, and to instead find a job, because even people without legs work. You are just missing an eye. This derogatorily referred to kimono time having a glass eye. Margaret would allegedly also threaten to sue kimono time for libel after she wrote on her Tumblr and Facebook about the whole ordeal. This was also the first time Margaret made it publicly known that on Venus's various social medias, she in fact, and not Venus, blocked people. Now, without knowing anything about the drama, a popular creator at the time called Xiao noticed that Venus was receiving a lot of online hate because of all this drama. Venus also uploaded videos like one on how to look half Japanese.
Looking half Japanese is the new fashionable trend in Japan.
And these kinds of videos elicited major controversy and debate within the community. In a nutshell, the online Lolita community and its indirect ties to the online living doll community were pretty much dominated by, and I mean this very literally, white girls. And these white girls and their legion of white fangirls were at the forefront of a growing online movement of what people saw as Asian fishing. These kinds of videos stereotyped Japanese people and culture and really contributed to creating this very idealized, glamorized perception of Japan, especially of the Japanese entertainment industry. And this is very, very important. Remember this for later. Xiao would make a video defending Venus against accusations of her being a weeaboo and Asian fisher. And although Venus was initially receptive to the video, it was later reported by Venus's channel and eventually removed. Xiao, who also lives in the UK, later planned to make videos with Venus. However, Venus would cancel last minute with no explanation and would block Xiao. Numerous anonymous sock accounts were also mysteriously created at the same time and began sending hateful tweets and threats to Xiao. These accounts also only seemed to follow one other Twitter account, Margaret's. Someone would then post Xiao's personal information, her phone number, and racial slurs. Following the backlash and people speculating that the one person behind all of this was Margaret, Margaret would then post a bizarre selfie of herself holding what is known in the UK as a victim care card, detailing herself as a victim of Xiao and the hate group that were her fans. Another controversy involved fellow living doll influencer Anastasia Spagna after her and Venus collaborated on a series of videos together in Poland. Anastasia didn't like how she looked in the videos and sent multiple messages to Venus to private them on her channel. When Venus didn't respond, Anastasia asked YouTube to intervene, which resulted in Margaret filing a counterclaim and making the videos public again. This controversy, like the previous two, really fell into the realm of Margaret accusing fellow content creators of clout chasing, copying, and trying to undermine her daughter's career. Now, during all of these controversies, people found it hilarious that Margaret was so liberally throwing around accusations of everybody else being fame suckers after they came across a magazine spread on Venus. Now, this spread wasn't even commissioned by the magazine, mind you. Margaret just wrote an article of her own free will and volition and sent it in, as one does. Not in this timeline, but somewhere else, I guess. Titled My Walking, Talking, Living Doll, the article is all about Margaret, and noticeably, Venus looks absolutely miserable. And I think all these controversies gradually showed people two things. One, Venus Angelic and her mother were an antagonistic force that were dead set on making Venus famous at any cost. And two, Margaret clearly had access to at least some of Venus's social media accounts. People noticed that some of the messages attributed to Venus during feuds and drama really didn't match up to her higher levels of English and grammar. It was obvious that many of Venus's messages were allegedly being written by her mother. And during all these various controversies, of which there were many, Venus and Margaret were touring Europe and the world at large, getting Venus onto talk shows in the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, Lithuania, and some. Now, these shows are striking examples of how willing Margaret was to allow her daughter to be presented as something of a spectacle for public scrutiny and ridicule. She was presented as an object of amusement, a peculiar child who was essentially mentally ill.
I mean, it's not sort of a normal part of childhood. I mean, I have a daughter too, and have to be honest with you, lovely as you are, Venus, I would be horrified if my daughter wanted to do this when she was 15.
Interviewers were horrified by her living doll persona and her perceived isolation from normal things like going to school and wearing normal clothes. In my research, it was very clear that during the 2010s and the proliferation of social media apps among kids and teens, we were at the beginning of a major generational divide in social media literacy and tolerance. These 2010s parents were freaking out about their clear lack of control over the identities and the cultural influences that their kids were consuming on their phones. The mainstream media and older parental generations saw online subcultures like the Lolita subculture as corrupting and in nature, and they were essentially having a moral panic against these subcultures. Margaret and Venus, interestingly enough, created a bridge between these two communities. Venus lived online, but she'd be on all these normie shows watched by boomers who just saw a girl dressed as a doll and flipped out. And because of this, Venus was always berated, humiliated, and paraded as an example of how creepy, abnormal, and harmful online subcultures like the Lolita community were. And I just want to acknowledge how incredibly twisted and cruel this is for grown adults who should know better to create a spectacle out of an unassuming child for entertainment. And although these adults were deplorably exploitative in their treatment of Venus, she ought to have been protected from these situations from a parent. But it seemed the only time Margaret wanted to protect Venus from interviewers was when Margaret herself was called out or her parental choices were put into question. Margaret's confrontational attitude in some of these interviews was palpable. She would, in one Canadian interview, cover Venus's ears when the interviewer started asking Venus about feminism. And Margaret would make sure to tell us, and I quote, "Dolls are not women and women are not dolls, and let's keep everything practical and logical and don't even talk to me about feminism." The interviewer is stunned that Margaret would block Venus's ears. He points out that Venus is 17 and that when she's 18, Margaret won't be able to block her ears anymore. To which Margaret responds that, quote, "She's not 18 yet," and becomes very agitated at the prospect of Venus being an adult, capable, for once, of making her own decisions. And in all of this, throughout the peak of her career, Venus was therefore subjected to a twofold stream of judgment. On the one hand, as I said, she was being judged by the mainstream, who didn't seem to care to try to understand what was going on. The mainstream didn't care about the broader toxicity of the living doll trend, which Venus, like many teen girls at the time, was a victim of. It was good fear-mongering content that boomers turned their noses up to, but nothing more. And the mainstream also had no interest in the intricacies of the Lolita subculture. For the mainstream, teens dressing like dolls and wearing unconventional makeup was simply infantilism. Beyond the mainstream's imagination, Lolita fashion actually has a very deep and somewhat empowering backstory that was clearly providing many girls and women with a means of self-expression, with confidence, and with beauty that our everyday cultural expectations refused to grant them. It was more convenient to present Venus as an abnormality in a derogatory sense. And do remember that it was Margaret who put Venus before the mainstream time and time again. And then, on the other hand, Venus was being judged by the internet, the one place she had found community and solace in. In her mother's poisoning the well and making it seem that everybody was against her, vying for her fame and dreams of becoming a Japanese idol, Venus found herself being judged and criticized on her home turf. And I would argue that this twofold judgment meant that the only person that Venus could inevitably turn to was her mother, the source of all this judgment and the source of her isolation. And this brings us to the most extreme example of Margaret's mom-aging and the detrimental costs that come with it when Venus finally had her shot at becoming a Japanese idol.
This video, I show you how I match my makeup to fit with my baby pink frilly dress. This one here.
Now remember when I said that Venus and other Caucasian Lolita influencers were at the forefront of promoting an idealized, glamorized image of the Japanese entertainment industry? Well, the dark consequences of this world would be seen in what became known as the Bodyline Controversy, a controversy which spanned over many years and across continents. This controversy really stands as a cautionary tale against idealizing modeling and specifically the Japanese entertainment industry in the 2010s. Described as the Lolita Walmart, Bodyline was the 2010s go-to for affordable Lolita fashion and costumes. You can just imagine Bodyline's appeal to a growing global consumer base of teenage girls who don't have any money and yet want to look like their favorite trending Lolitas, their favorite Japanese idols, or their favorite living dolls. Cosplaying was a huge thing online at the time, and Bodyline acted as the equivalent of Shein for this online subculture throughout the 2010s. Bodyline's business practice was very typical of fast fashion, allegedly stealing designs from other brands and independent labels, a cheap Chinese mass production line, and exploitative promo. And one of these exploitative publicity stunts was the then infamous Bodyline modeling contest. Now, this contest was run monthly, and teens and young women from across the world would submit themselves as aspiring Bodyline models. If they won, they'd be flown out to Japan, which in the minds of many teenage girls was essentially their foot into the world of becoming a Japanese idol. Now, practically all official information on the Bodyline modeling contests has been scrubbed from the internet since the corporation's closure in 2017. May it not rest in peace. But as far as I can tell, the grand prize for the winner of this contest was the opportunity for her to be flown out to Japan to have an official photo shoot with Bodyline, as well as a $1,000 cash prize, which for me at least says a lot. Only teenage girls and very young, and I'd argue very naive and impressionable women are going to enter a highly competitive modeling contest, a contest that requires them to make the long and tiring journey to Japan and essentially model and work for free for a measly $1,000. Submissions were also really strict. You couldn't be over a certain weight and height, which for the world of modeling, sure, I guess, but you also couldn't be over a certain age, namely 20. The minimum entry age was also dropped to 13 years old. And again, I think this has everything to do with not just Lolita fashion modeling, but with trying to get away with exploiting young, impressionable, dewy-eyed and desperate teen girls and women who dream of becoming Japanese idols and superstars. Now, Bodyline's CEO was an infamous character within the global Lolita community. Known as simply Mr. Yan, he wore top hats, cloaks, and only Victorian-esque black gothic attire, which made him look like a wizard. He allegedly wore these clothes to make himself look thinner and taller. He was initially seen as a rather eccentric 30-something-year-old man with a clear passion for male gothic Lolita styles, and he came to the attention of the Lolita community after Bodyline began featuring videos of him on their website. People found these videos hilarious, and Mr. Yan would immediately become an online meme. His memification was cemented after Bodyline would officially release a full-length body pillow of Mr. Yan, both donning his usual gothic look and in swimming briefs. This seemingly made a lot of business sense because, according to Mr. Yan, he received tons of love letters from the Lolita community, a community populated by a large teen girl demographic. Now, in the winter of 2012, a then 15-year-old Venus Angelic would attend a Hyper Japan event in London. This is the UK's largest exhibition and festival celebrating everything Japanese culture. And at this event, Venus would meet Mr. Yan, who knew who she was. Venus would meet him and his female manager, and a couple hours after saying their goodbyes, Mr. Yan would seek Venus out again and invite her out to dinner. Now, just remember, this is a 15-year-old girl at an event alone, being asked out to dinner by not just a complete stranger to her, but by a man who is well into his 30s at the time. Venus then called her mother to ask her permission to go out with Mr. Yan, and it probably comes as no surprise to you that Margaret said yes. My 15-year-old daughter can go out to dinner with an adult man and stranger. So Venus would go out to dinner with Mr. Yan and his female manager, who proceeded to ask her questions like how many Bodyline dresses she owns, who her friends are, does she always wear Lolita dresses, as well as whether she had a boyfriend. Mr. Yan would then ask for Venus's phone number, and the two texted each other for about a year. Mr. Yan would then return to London in 2013 and meet with Venus yet again. This would be the first time Margaret met the adult man who had gone out to dinner with her 15-year-old daughter and had allegedly been texting her 15-year-old daughter for a year. At this dinner meeting, Mr. Yan would compliment Venus on her purity, saying that she looks pure with and without makeup, which is good. And 2 weeks after that meeting, a then 16-year-old Venus would be crowned the winner of the Bodyline modeling contest. She would be flown out to Japan on her own to become an official Bodyline model. Venus would be put up in a 2-star hotel and on landing in Japan would be put to work modeling immediately. 6 out of the 9 days she was there were spent modeling for Bodyline. And mind you, as the winner of the Bodyline modeling contest, she wasn't being paid for this photo shoot at all. She also had to do her makeup and hair herself. The photo shoots would last 11 hours from 8:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. with a mere 30-minute lunch break. Mind you, this is a 16-year-old child working 11 hours every single day as a full-time model for free and alone in a foreign country. Contractually, Venus also couldn't refuse to wear any of the outfits they put her in, even the ones she would say she found embarrassing or felt uncomfortable wearing. Now, Venus would relay all of this in a now deleted video called Venus Fall in Dream, where she exposed some truly disturbing information about her time with Bodyline. While in Japan, the only people she was in contact with were Mr. Yan, his female manager called Mrs. Takinami, and a man called Mr. Murakami, who photographed her and designed or replicated all of Bodyline's clothes. On her 3 days off, Venus would go out with these 3 adults, and she detailed a conversation she had with Mrs. Takinami, who asked Venus if she wanted to live in Japan forever. Venus, naturally, like all teen Japanophiles at the time, said yes, of course, and Mrs. Takinami then told Venus that she could indeed live in Japan forever if she married a Japanese man. Venus would respond that she was only 16 years old and didn't think about men in that way, to which Mrs. Takinami would ask Venus what her type in men would be, whether her type in men might be a kind man like Mr. Murakami. Mind you, when Venus was accosted with these questions by Mrs. Takinami, they were both naked in a natural Japanese hot spring. Venus would reveal that Mrs. Takinami would often try to talk to her about marriage during her photo shoots. Now, at the time, many people didn't believe Venus or didn't take it seriously. At the time, Venus was a somewhat disliked figure in the Lolita community, mainly because of her and Margaret's recent appearance on the TLC show My Strange Addiction. More on that later. A major issue with Lolita fashion that we've already touched on is that it isn't taken seriously by the mainstream, and Venus's portrayal of her style as a strange addiction wasn't doing the community any favors. Also, Venus's audience were mainly young girls and teens who loved Japan. They loved Lolita fashion, and I think many of them were a bit too young to understand the true ramifications of what Mr. Yan and his staff were allegedly doing. The ideal of modeling all day in Japan and going out all day and all night with the CEO of Bodyline who thinks you're a cute living doll sounded like a dream come true to many impressionable fans and aspiring idols. But the reality of modeling all day, the reality of being a child alone in a foreign country with nobody to turn to, the reality of going out with a 30 to 40-year-old CEO who thinks you're an object and knows that you're a child is far, far different. It's far darker. And honestly, researching all of this just shattered my heart for Venus. And it unfortunately does not end there. According to Mr. Yan, Venus was merely upset that she hadn't been chosen twice in a row for the modeling contest, and she simply exposed him and Bodyline out of spite. Bodyline also released a statement calling Venus a princess who essentially didn't want to work but wanted to be treated well. They claimed that she misrepresented her weight and wasn't actually as underweight as she'd led them to believe. They claimed that she also cost them thousands of dollars because they had to throw away all the clothes she'd modeled in because, and I kid you not, her body odor made the dresses unsullable. They said all of this about an already underweight 16-year-old child who they were still trying to get to lose weight and were using as free child labor during a heat wave in Japan. Oh yes, and they took this child to a karaoke room for Mr. Yan's birthday where she danced on a sofa for all the adults. She was the only child there, and I have no words. When it comes to Venus's accusations against Bodyline, my personal stance is very clear and very simple. Whenever a child makes these kinds of accusations against an adult, I will always, without question or fail, believe the child. Human history is a history of adults and unaliving children and women without consequence or fail, and I have little to no interest in the excuses. Thankfully, the Lolita community did not buy into Bodyline's very bizarre statement, and clearly Bodyline saying nothing would have been a far better move for their reputation. This was perhaps also because Venus wasn't the first contest winner to come out with disgusting and disturbing allegations against Bodyline. She was, however, definitely one of the first to not make these accusations anonymously. She was allegedly threatened by Mr. Yan for posting her video about her experience with Bodyline and was threatened into taking it down. Yet all the way back in around 2009, rumors were already circulating that the Bodyline modeling contest was a scam, that it wasn't a contest at all, and was simply a way for Mr. Yan to find a young and submissive foreign wife or waifu. Basically, many former winners allegedly told friends and forums that when they went to Japan, they were asked about marriage like Venus was, they went on romantic and highly inappropriate outings with Mr. Yan and his staff like Venus did, and that he touched them and made advances towards them. One model was even allegedly asked to be with Mr. Yan when she decided to leave Bodyline to be with her boyfriend and start a family with him. Bodyline allegedly gave her an ultimatum: end her pregnancy or commit to them and be with Mr. Yan. Nadia, another Lolita who won the contest, was also rumored to have been hit on by Mr. Yan, who was allegedly besotted with her. He actually named a dress design after her, calling it Love Nadia, after she left Japan and as such left him. Another 18-year-old winner who went to Japan was also subjected to Mr. Yan allegedly touching her inappropriately. He also showed off to her, and he even tried to get her to come back to a hotel room with him. By the end of her stay, he confessed his love to her, asked for her hand in marriage, and asked her to stay in Japan with him forever. Remember, she's 18 and he's a man in his late 30s. And allegedly, when she refused him, he made her pay for her airline flights and hotel stay, all of which were meant to be covered by Bodyline because, well, she was the winner of the Bodyline modeling contest. Bodyline still used her pictures on their website and for promotion, and Mr. Yan would upload a video of himself kicking a mirror in order to promote a sale which he called Mr. Yan's Furious Sale. The Lolita community found this pretty funny at the time, given they didn't know any of the context. It was all seemingly a part of Mr. Yan's memeable appeal. However, this mirror smashing stunt was allegedly all in relation to Mr. Yan being furious at having been rejected by this 18-year-old contest winner and trying to garner attention for yet another contest and yet another opportunity to find a waifu. And Mr. Yan pretty much got away with all of this. Girls and young women kept entering the contest for years, allured by a free trip to Japan and promises of becoming a Lolita model. And I mean, Mr. Yan was a living, walking meme. Nobody was really believing that this comically dressed man was anything but a funny guy at the very least, and a creep to stay away from at most. I think largely thanks to him being a meme, him being a creep was simply something to meme about. For instance, in 2016, a former fashion and Lolita convention called RuffleCon hosted an event called Mr. Yan's Next Top Waifu 18+, where women could enter to compete to be crowned Mr. Yan's next wife. The event's description reads, "The search is on. Mr. Yan himself has come all the way from Japan to RuffleCon to find his next wife. Come join us to see who will be crowned Mr. Yan's next top waifu. It could be you." At least 83 Lolitas signed up online. This was all going down before the #MeToo movement, and you can very much tell. After #MeToo, and after I think it was clear that in this new climate, such accusations were finally, hopefully, going to be taken seriously, Bodyline parted ways with Mr. Yan and underwent a significant rebrand away from Lolita fashion. And I only go into all this backstory about Bodyline because I think it really demonstrates the world of Exposé exploitation that Venus Angelic was coerced into by her mother. A mother who willingly allegedly sent her daughter to dinner with Mr. Yan, who allowed him to text her for a year, who allowed her daughter to enter the Bodyline modeling contest, who went to dinner with Mr. Yan where he called Venus pure and told her to lose more weight, and who sent her daughter, a child, to Japan on her own to be devoured for 9 days by jackals who were allegedly auditioning her as a potential bride to a predator. And yet, as a child, she was inevitably dependent on them, on her mother, for parental guidance. Guidance that she was getting in the form of a social media manager who lived vicariously through her. This is so important in giving context to why children who are failed so miserably by adults very often end up in very difficult situations and lifestyles as adults. Which leads us, fittingly, to the Exposé of Margaret Palermo and the true grip of her influence and dominance over Venus Angelic.
I am 16 years old and I am a living doll.
Now, Venus really shot to mainstream stardom after her appearance on season 5 of My Strange Addiction.
My mom is my best friend, but she also is my manager, assistant, and teacher.
This was the ultimate confirmation that Margaret was the quintessential example, the reigning queen, the London-based deity of stage moms bar none. The episode basically followed the duration of Venus and Margaret entering her into the Bodyline modeling contest. It involved her making content for YouTube, having a photo shoot for her Bodyline entry, and finding out that she'd won the competition. What was most striking about this episode was how, during Venus's living doll photo shoot, Margaret decided to dress up as a doll herself and had some pictures taken as well, as mother does. In the episode, Venus would say the following about entering the Bodyline contest. First, I was kind of insecure and unsure. Should I really do the online contest for a doll clothing line? But my mum supported me and she gave me confidence. She said, yes, you can do this. I believe in you. And as we know, Venus went to Japan, became the face of Bodyline, and was most probably forever scarred from that horrendous experience. Now, when Venus was in Japan modeling for Mr. Yan, they went to Tokyo Disneyland. Venus arranged to meet and greet her fans there, but Mr. Yan and his staff prohibited her having her photograph taken, and this was something that Venus exposed them for. Yet one thing people didn't know was that one of those fans who had come to meet and greet her was a young man called Maneki. Maneki had been a fan of Venus's since she was 13 years old. He would have been 19 years old when he became a fan of a then 13-year-old Venus Angelic. According to Venus, he had fallen in love with her through her videos in 2011. For Venus, alone in Tokyo, it was love at first sight, and I think that because she was alone and didn't have Margaret controlling her every move, she was able to obtain his contact details, and they effectively began a secret relationship. I think it's fair to say that Margaret had big aspirations for her daughter. Margaret had big aspirations for herself via her daughter. In my opinion, and based on my own analysis, Margaret had one of two options in mind for Venus's future. Either Venus would become so famous and therefore so rich that she'd be able to financially support Margaret indefinitely, or, and I think this was her main objective, Margaret wanted to marry Venus off to a wealthy man in the specifically Asian entertainment industry, like a Mr. Yan, where financially providing for one's parents is culturally the norm and she'd not only be taken care of for life, but lavishly provided for. I think it was very intentional that Margaret sent Venus to Japan alone. I think it is very unlikely that Margaret, who was serially online and knew the ins and outs of YouTube, content creation, and the industry they were trying to get Venus into, wouldn't have known about all the rumors circulating about Mr. Yan. Japan was an opportunity to get Venus into serious modeling or junior idol culture, and this would have inevitably exposed her to very, very wealthy men. And I don't think that any of this was a coincidence. In my humble opinion, Margaret strictly controlled Venus's sexuality. She chose all of her outfits for her content. As I've already said in an interview, Margaret covered Venus's ears when the interviewer started asking Venus about feminism. Margaret fixated over Venus's purity and innocence, comparing her daughter's virtuousness to other young girls who came home pregnant.
I would be horrified if she comes home pregnant.
Venus allegedly even slept in her mother's bed until she was 18 years old. And yet, on the other hand, Margaret was very much at the forefront of sexualizing Venus, of objectifying Venus. She, for instance, edited a photograph of an underage Venus to enlarge her chest for a photo shoot. She had aspirations for Venus to become a junior idol, which in and beyond Japan is highly controversial for obvious reasons. Therefore, it was clear that Maneki proved an issue. Initially, Margaret seemed on board with the whole thing, probably because she didn't know the full picture of who Manaki was and his financial prospects. Margaret had probably bet on many things happening for her and Venus while Venus was in Japan trying to become a superstar. What Margaret couldn't have bet on was her daughter meeting one of her fans who happened to be not a Japanese entertainment tycoon, but rather a somewhat shy, somewhat pervy 22-year-old factory worker. Now, when Venus was 17 years old, Margaret would move the family to the Netherlands. For a long time, people had been speculating that the reason why Margaret moved Venus around so much had to do with tax evasion and a desire to get Venus better global publicity. The two wouldn't stay in the Netherlands for long before Margaret yeeted Venus to live in South Korea. As far as I can gather, Venus and Manaki's long-distance relationship involved Manaki flying out to see Venus and Margaret in, specifically, South Korea. For a brief spell, Venus would seemingly break up with Manaki on her social medias, changing the titles of her videos with him to "My Ex-Boyfriend." She would tell a fan who inquired about where her boyfriend was that, quote, she's not sure, but he's probably still a factory worker living in a small room of a shared house of factory workers. She claimed that he drank too much and kept things in secret from her, which didn't really fit with what people had seen of him and knew of him. Manaki was a shy and somewhat awkward person, and his vocation hadn't been a problem for Venus before. It had, however, become a problem for Margaret, as her lengthy posted diatribes about Manaki would suggest. It was as if somebody else was writing these things and changing these video titles.
I really didn't want to make this video, but I feel like you're basically forcing me, so I'm gonna do it.
On February 2nd, 2016, Margaret would take to Venus's Instagram to inform the internet that Venus had run away. It would be revealed that Venus and Manaki had already been married, which allowed Venus to get a spousal visa to live in Japan. A day later, Venus would upload a video explaining why she ran away from her mother and South Korea to live with Manaki in Japan on her spousal visa.
In this video, I'm gonna talk about how I ran away from home and the reason why.
According to Venus, she was relatively unhappy in South Korea. Her and Margaret were living in squalor, and she was essentially spending all of her time learning South Korean and doing social media. Manaki would come to visit them, and from what he saw, he was worried for Venus's safety and asked her to come back to Japan with him. When Venus asked her mother if she could move to Japan, her mother allegedly became furious, told Venus that Manaki had brainwashed her, was a PDF file, and was simply a factory worker. Venus would also say that her mother had threatened to delete her YouTube channel if she left, and that if she left, she would probably end up ruined, deserted by her husband, and forced to live a life as a homeless worker. Venus would also inform us that her mother had always told her that there are many millionaires looking for well-educated virgins with pale skin, which interestingly explained a lot of things in relation to Venus studying languages all the time and the whole bodyline situation. Venus would share a harrowing story of when she was 13 and her mother, as had seemingly become the norm, threatened to end her life in a bid to control and emotionally blackmail her daughter. During this particular incident, Margaret had allegedly taken a knife, threatened to inflict harm on herself before throwing the knife at Venus's head. Venus would say that she learned to navigate her mother's temper and erratic behavior by watching her words and ensuring not to escalate anything. She would claim that her mother physically disciplined her, claiming that if her words didn't work on Venus, then it was necessary for her to feel the words. On February 19th, 2016, Venus uploaded another video titled "Hacked by My Mom," in which she continued to expose the depths of Margaret's control over her social media and overall life. As many had speculated already, Venus confirmed that Margaret had control over all of her devices and social media accounts, and had also locked Venus out of her MacBook from another country. Venus tried to be positive, saying that despite all of this pressure, life goes on. She was going to keep fighting. By March, Margaret filed a series of false DMCA copyright claims against Venus's YouTube channel, essentially shutting down her daughter's entire channel and source of income. Cleverly, by filing false copyright claims, Margaret is then given the name and full address of the person she files claims against if that person decides to counterclaim. This meant that if Venus wanted her channel back, she would be giving her mother information about her whereabouts. Now, at the time, Margaret, of course, would tell an entirely different story. Margaret would claim that Venus basically stole everything from her by running away. According to Margaret, Venus had married Manaki before running away, but had been unhappy with him and had cheated on him at least once. Venus had hooked up with the best friend of a Korean man Margaret was acquainted with, and Margaret would post a picture of someone who she claimed to be Venus asleep in bed with him. Now, everybody thought that this was Margaret in a wig, because at this point it was apparent that Margaret was doing everything and anything to get Venus back to her. In this video of facts, Margaret would say that she, that is Venus, got her spouse visa an additional 10,000 USD from my work, so she thought it's time to F me over. Wow. It really does sound like she wants her daughter home safe and sound and not, I don't know, $10,000. Margaret would begin to continually accuse Venus of having caused her physical harm. She would accuse Venus of trying to unalive her, saying that although she had photo evidence of the bruises she obtained from her daughter's regular attacks and attempts at strangulation, she didn't have access to them because Venus stole her computer. She would, for years after Venus ran away, post and make these claims, labeling herself as a hashtag parent. Now, this was all very surprising considering that Margaret had always had a reputation for defending Venus vehemently online and never had a bad word to say about her. She would, for instance, write things like, "I adore at Venus Angelic that even though she is bullied since the day she went viral with only 15, her soul is still totally pure like a child's. She is so talented, diligent and kind and never answers back to any bully or rude person. Very few people in this world are so pure and so strong." Now, however, Margaret, the hashtag abused parent, had done a complete 180, going so far as to call her daughter a stupid before calling her an accident. So essentially, what we can take away from this is very clear to me. In my opinion, Margaret, who was financially dependent on her daughter, was in a tight spot. She was fine with Venus marrying Manaki until, in my opinion, she realized that a spousal visa to live in Japan didn't apply to her as one of Venus's dependents or an additional family member. Remember, as I speculated before, Margaret wanted to marry Venus off to a wealthy Japanese entertainment exec. She wanted to settle in Japan, and she wanted to live a life supported by Venus's career as an idol and Venus's wealthy new husband. Realizing that this was not going to happen with Manaki, the factory worker, and the spousal visa, she promptly changed the titles of Venus's videos and allegedly tried to get Venus to divorce him. However, like the Canadian interviewer had prophesied, when Venus came of age, she very well may start thinking and doing for herself, and that she did. She ran away from Margaret. She stayed married to Manaki and was now financially supporting herself and her new husband. This is every mom-ager's worst nightmare and really demonstrates the pressure Venus was put under throughout her childhood. Margaret would go as far as to describe Venus cutting her off as an act of unaliving me. This would all blow up mainly because, as I said, Margaret would make some truly shocking accusations, claiming that Venus was a pathological liar and manipulator who had trampled on a dog, bitten off her mother's finger, had unalived a hamster, and, as we already know, had cheated before and after her marriage to Manaki. And I just relay all of this to show the extent to which this all blew up online. This was a huge moment on the internet at the time, a truly cataclysmic expose of the reality behind a very carefully curated brand. Margaret would also make a now deleted video trying to pursue influencing on her own, which really demonstrates the desperate situation she was in. In this video, she tries to, and I kid you not, personify Venus Angelic, remaking a bubble foam hair dye video that Venus made on her own channel. People were really beginning to see Margaret's true colors in a way that I can't imagine she ever intended. And these colors really shone like a peacock's tail when, during all of this, Margaret had her infamous spiral into what can only be described as a bizarre, unstable, and frightening cry for help. This spiral saw her traveling in the span of 4 months back and forth from South Korea to Japan, to Canada, and to the United States, all in a vengeful bid to get not so much Venus back, in as much as Venus's income back. As soon as Venus posted her third video about being hacked by her mother, the Venus Angelic YouTube channel would seemingly be deleted. At around the same time, Margaret would also post a nude photograph of herself at an international airport in Japan. Under the picture, she would say that she hoped this picture got both Venus and Manaki to think. She describes her relationship with Venus as a good good relationship, which no good person would have disturbed. And this is why people believe that Margaret has undiagnosed NPD and that in the airport, she was essentially having a breakdown. She had lost control of her daughter, a daughter who was more attractive and youthful than her, thus making it necessary for Margaret to make it known to the internet and to Venus how attractive she was, standing naked in an abandoned airport toilet. According to Margaret's logic, it's unfair that Venus left her and married somebody else. In Margaret's mind, she not only made Venus angelic, but the very sentient being of Venus herself. Therefore, everything that Venus makes, like money, by default had been made by Margaret. By default, belonged to Margaret. Now, from February to May of 2016, Margaret was truly homeless, and the drama forums were trying their best to follow her around Japan during this time. It was a feat. To sum it up in one sentence, her activity in Japan suggests that she was allegedly trying to either find herself a husband before her tourist visa expired, or was trying to find a way for Venus to financially provide for her again, and holding Venus's channel under what can essentially be described as ransom was her best way of doing this. During her homelessness in Japan, Margaret was forced to make money by continuing to virtually exploit her daughter. This therefore led to her copyright claiming the Venus Angelic YouTube channel, relaunching the Venus Angelic online shop, and registering numerous domains that she thought Venus may potentially use on social media. Margaret would also go to Venus's house while Manaki and Venus weren't in, and would even on another occasion accost Manaki on his way home from work, filming him and his number plate and posting this online for reasons only she will ever know. However, her efforts were largely fruitless. Her tourist visa expired, she was forced to leave East Asia, and she decided to go to Canada before then informing the internet that she was actually going to the United States so as to officially sue Venus in a court of law. This all occurred in the span of February to May. Mind you, a measly 4 months. If Margaret had put that much effort into getting a job, she'd have been VP of the company by the end of May. Fortunately, Venus's channel was returned to her on May 27, 2016, but unfortunately Margaret immediately filed yet another false copyright claim, which, because YouTube is YouTube, immediately shut down Venus's channel yet again. This time around, Margaret gave Venus a choice. If Venus paid her $3,000 a month in compensation for damages, she would give Venus her channel back and stop copywriting her. Oh yes, and at this time, Margaret would also make it known to the internet that she had an IQ of 152. Staying in a hotel in Seoul, South Korea at the time, Margaret would take to Instagram in a lengthy post stating that Venus earned $15,000 a month on YouTube, and that she was sorry that as a mom-ager, she'd created a monster, supported her with all her finances, energy, and time. According to Margaret, the Venus Angelic YouTube channel was a joint channel, and because of her momfluencing, the channel was largely her work and essentially made her daughter a thief. Margaret took photos and videos of Venus. She marketed Venus by getting them onto daytime television shows. According to her, the Venus Angelic YouTube channel was initially hers and was hacked by Venus when she made the channel. To this day, Margaret re-uploads videos of Venus onto her own YouTube channel, which suggests to me that she most definitely still believes that she is the sole owner of her daughter's social media output. Margaret also claimed that children should respect their parents and not ruin them. Also, parents are not obliged to do more than keep their children healthy, safe, and educated. Yes, she was very, very safe with Mr. Yan, alone in Japan, being used as objectified child labor and being recruited as a potential child bride. But that's just my opinion. Now, by June, Margaret's antics had made no difference in getting Venus to either return to her or pay up. So she did what she naturally could only do: write and perform a hymn to Venus Angelic. Vanus Angelicus came from my uterus. Botticelli's jealous. You are a miracle. Build your empire, most luminous rose. All the hearts melt when you strike a pose. Vanus Angelicus. Your fans are numerous. You're a doll, beautiful, and you are a muse. Sweet as a chocolate, a strong girl and so cute. One real unicorn. You are beloved everywhere. It was official. Margaret had lyrical depth, moves, and wasn't afraid to show them to the world during during a period in which she was allegedly trying to blackmail her daughter for money. By July, internet sleuths would follow Margaret back to Japan, and many people's speculations of Margaret's intentions in Japan would be confirmed when her Japanese Tinder profile was discovered. According to Margaret, she wanted to marry a matching Japanese guy and be happy together. At the time, she was living in a women's-only student dormitory and was essentially existing off her final Swiss child support checks. She also began uploading videos to her own channel, such as a kawaii makeup tutorial, as well as posted an infamous selfie of herself with Venus's favorite plushie toy propped up conveniently in the background. I cannot express enough how bleak things were looking for Margaret. She was homeless, jobless, and worst of all, entitled. That is a truly disastrous combination of misfortunes. And sadly for Margaret, YouTube would officially and permanently return Venus's channel to its rightful owner by mid-July. And this unprecedented internet saga would start to gradually die down, much to Margaret's chagrin. Her reputation had been obliterated, and her online existence pretty much revolved around making sure that everybody knew that she'd given up her life to raise Venus and create the Venus Angelic brand. Now, I'm sorry, but I have to say this, and I have to say this loud and clear for all the Matilda parents, for all the horrid Henry parents sitting all the way at the back, because I hate this all too normalized narrative so much. And I hear this "I gave up my life for you" parental tactic a lot. If you decide to have a child and as a result give up your life to raise them, that is on you. 101% on you. You made the decision to have them, and therefore all consequences and all regrets are on you. Your child has absolutely no obligation to be grateful for your decision to bring them into this world, for your decision to allegedly use them as a cash cow and means of income, for your decision to mommy manage them into the toxic world of living doll influencing. I would go as far as to say children don't need to be grateful to their parents for anything, actually. Radical, I know, but raising your child, providing for them, giving them a bedroom and entertainment, paying their bills, this is the bare minimum when it comes to the rights of the child. And Margaret, based on everything we can see online, wasn't even always providing Venus with the bare minimum. And in the aftermath of the saga, the post-Margaret life of Venus Angelic would reveal how terribly she was let down as a child and the dire consequences that can leave and scar you with as an adult.
I wish people would just stop judging others on the way they are.
Now, remember when Margaret was trying to allegedly blackmail Venus into sending her a monthly check of $3,000 US? Remember when she said that parents are only obliged to keep their children healthy, safe, and educated? Well, when it comes to safety, we need only look to Margaret allowing an underage Venus to fly out to Japan alone to model for Bodyline, and we can obviously counter any claim to safety being a priority. When it comes to education, Venus was mostly homeschooled, moved from country to country, and spent most of her childhood being managed by her mother in pursuit of fame and money. And when it comes to health, we need only look at how obsessed Venus and her mother were with her weight in relation to being a living doll and aspiring Japanese idol, and we need only look at the instance of Margaret editing a photo of her underage daughter's chest to make her chest appear larger for a photo shoot. But this health factor goes a lot deeper. Now, I will keep this brief because this is a very sensitive topic, so do skip to the following timestamp if discussions of ED are not something you need or want to hear right now. Please protect your peace. And B, based on what I'm seeing of Venus now, I do believe this is something she is still continually struggling with. And I think that, as with someone like Eugenia Cooney, people talking publicly about your ED doesn't actually help. But this is a very important conversation into generational trauma, mental illness, and just as importantly, the darker side of growing up as a living doll. And for that reason, we need to discuss this in the context of Venus Angelic's adult life. In 2016, when Venus ran away to live with Manaki in Japan, she contacted a surgeon in South Korea to get illegal loss. Venus weighed 53 kgs at the time. This surgeon was a man called Dr. Kang Se-hoon, who in 2017 was sentenced to jail for medical malpractice. In 2014, he performed illegal surgery on Korean rock star Shin Hao-shon, who, as a result of the surgery, lost his life after suffering abdominal pain and high fevers. Mind you, Shin Hao-shon had gone into Dr. Kang for pretty much straightforward abdominal surgery, and the doctor, of his own volition and without permission, decided to also perform illegal on him. Since then, many other patients came forward, as well as revelations of several more surgery-related fatalities at the hands of this doctor. Venus would travel from Japan to Korea to get this procedure, which involved stapling her stomach, removing her intestine, and unbeknownst to her, the removal of her gallbladder and appendix. Now, none of her audience were aware of this, but in December 2017, Venus would be hospitalized for a few days after experiencing abdominal issues and a high fever. By January 2018, Venus would be hospitalized yet again, weighing a meager 42 kgs and displaying signs of being severely malnourished. This time around, she'd be hospitalized for over a month after an infection nearly ended her life. 2 weeks after leaving the hospital, Venus would upload a now deleted video titled "Scared of Getting Fat," claiming that the reason she was in hospital was because of her fear of gaining weight, as well as her belief that she was fat. She'd explain how her weight was and continues to be an all-consuming concern of hers, stating that throughout her life, she'd considered herself morbidly obese, or as she put it, fantasy fat. She would also find herself surprised when any clothes fit her. She constantly compared herself to friends and people online, especially in the living doll community, believing that others were speaking about her weight behind her back. She'd say that although her highest ever weight had been a mere 60 kgs, she couldn't quite comprehend how she wasn't fat and how her weight wasn't a point of social spectacle and ridicule online. She'd also reveal, after relaying all of this highly concerning information, that although the hospital had evaluated her for an ED, her results claimed that no, she didn't have one. She was simply, and I quote, cuckoo. And I think I know why. Venus would say that in the evaluation, she became what I would call a professional child actor. She put on a bright, bubbly smile. She spoke about how happy and hardworking she was. She told the evaluator that everything in her life was swell and great and positive, and she was evaluated based on that performance. This is a performance that she had learned from an early age, that she was expected to embody every single day of her childhood in order to quite literally survive. And that, in my opinion, was what she was doing in that hospital and in that evaluation. She was surviving. Venus said that she'd gotten the surgery behind Maniki's back, saying that when she'd initially brought it up with him, he'd said that he'd end their relationship if she went through with it. Now, a telltale sign of her having a was that she did indeed go through with it, deciding to deal with the consequences of the decision later. And I think that her husband's response to her going through with it was revelatory for Venus. It was very apparent that Maniki, as well as Maniki's mother, were a huge support for her during this time, giving her the kind of unconditional kindness and understanding that she'd never experienced before. She started, for the first time in her life, to talk to people about these harmful thoughts and concerns around her body image, and this clearly helped her through a very long and difficult recovery. Venus would have to undergo very invasive stomach reconstructive surgery and would post a video revealing everything in April 2018, acknowledging for the first time that she had a She would also say that with the help of Maniki and his family, she was, for the first time in her life, in recovery. Margaret would, of course, take this opportunity to promote her Instagram and share some never-before-seen photos of Venus with the internet. This would also involve Margaret's own now-deleted reaction video and a side-by-side photo of her in similar pajamas to the ones Venus wore during her hospital stay. Margaret would also say that, quote, "We both might for reasons and consequences of the splitting," referring, as always, to Venus leaving her homeless and penniless. Mind you, although Venus had her YouTube back, at this time, Margaret still had Venus's Twitter and Facebook under a similar kind of ransom. But after Venus's hospitalization, things really did start to look a lot better for her. She began featuring Maniki in her content, and they seemed to be, albeit very young and still figuring things out, in a good place. I would call this Venus's honeymoon period. She was finally, genuinely, financially and existentially free from Margaret, who was God and the drama forums only knew where. She was finally in recovery, and she finally had a family that she could openly and honestly talk to and be with. Venus would even post about how understanding Maniki was of her going through a rebellious phase, because she was posting more assertively and argumentatively about and at him online. This would be the first and only time that Venus Angelic had the space to explore her identity, to figure out who she was beyond beyond being a living doll and a construct of exploitative, traumatized, and leeching adults. This would last no more than a single year. In early 2019, Venus made several announcements. Firstly, she came out as gay, which, although very well received, made many people wonder about what was happening in her marriage. At this point, Venus and Manaki had been married for 3 years. Secondly, Venus would also announce that she had borderline personality in a lengthy post and cry for help, where she said, and I quote, "With mental illnesses, you can't enjoy your life even if you could order everything you want with the push of a button. Sometimes I dissociate and it feels like I'm not part of this world. Food has no taste, music is just noise, and love is a chemical con job. I probably deserve all of this for being a piece of human being." I think Venus's coming out and cries for help online during this time is very telling of the complicated and difficult task former child stars have with figuring out their identities in adulthood. Unlike many children, child stars aren't allowed to develop and cultivate a sense of identity. And this is made even worse by the fact that the world around you already has a perception, already has an idea and desire of who you are that serves them. The pressures and pursuit of fame, coupled with unrelenting work schedules, supporting their families, and missing out on crucial, healthy childhood developmental stages, make self-discovery almost impossible. And this, for me, is where health comes in. Many former child stars have suffered with severe mental health issues, from body dysmorphia, addictions, and EDs in adulthood. Lindsay Lohan, Drew Barrymore, Amanda Bynes, Demi Lovato, Alison Stoner, and many more have been incredibly brave and open about their experiences with addictions and EDs in adulthood. I give this context in order to give a foundation to what tragically transpired in Venus's life from 2019 onwards. Venus, like many child stars, had no childhood. She was financially supporting herself and Margaret, was homeschooled, clearly didn't have many, if any, real friends, and existed daily as a living doll. Living dolls are, importantly and intentionally, almost post-sexual. They're meant to be void of sexuality in order to fulfill the interests, both or simply aesthetically, of others. Margaret was also constantly moving them around the world, which intentionally fostered codependency and Venus's social isolation, in my opinion. Not much, if any, personality can be discovered, tried or tested or realized in that environment. As I've said, Venus and Margaret allegedly shared a bed until Venus was of age, which really shows how even in times when any child should have alone time to extract themselves from everything and just think and be a potato, Venus didn't even have that. And I don't think Venus knew how to be that in adulthood. It is absolutely no surprise to me that Venus's adulthood has been one riddled in severe mental health struggles, alcoholism, addictions, and unstable relationships. From mid-2019 to the end of 2019, I would summarize Venus as fluctuating between two realities. And these realities were both in the service of her discovering who she was and who she wanted to be. On the one hand, she was going to therapy, she was getting diagnosed with mental and even started a job working at a PR company. She stopped wearing kawaii clothes and Lolita fashion and made the decision to stop posting about her private life. This all looked very, very good. However, on the other hand, it was very apparent that Venus had started drinking, which resulted in a series of drunk live streams and videos revealing that she had resorted to drinking cooking wine and talking about her intimate life with Manaki. All of these live streams and videos resulted in Venus, firstly, seeming to be changing her opinions of her husband. She now seemed to see him as a creepy, obsessive fan and was clearly coming to the realization that she had gotten married too young. Venus would also equate Manaki to her mother, and this would all stem from the fact that he had lost his job and Venus was now supporting the two of them financially. I would say that this probably triggered something in Venus. She was finally given the space to not be a workaholic and to find herself, but was suddenly made to fulfill the role of a breadwinner, which she had so recently escaped from. She felt that she was living to please her husband, similarly to how she had lived to please her mother. And I think this all compounded in her using alcohol as a crutch and means to cope.
I want to get a piece of paper that has Manaki's face printed on it. I'm gonna stick it on the Tupperware and then smash the fucking piece of Tupperware. That's how much I hate him.
Venus would reveal that she was looking for a new place because she couldn't stand living with Manaki anymore. Apparently, he didn't take out the trash and left food to rot while she was working. He didn't want to get a job, but was also seemingly too embarrassed to tell his parents about the situation. Venus was becoming resentful at having to do things she didn't want to do in order to pay rent, but she assured her fans that she wasn't doing adult work to make money.
It's so difficult to divorce once you're married. Like, you are just divorced like that. It just takes so much time. My husband doesn't take out the trash. He doesn't take care of anything while I was away and living outside of the environment because of work, and he just let everything rot. So this is the problem. He doesn't want to get a baito or like a job in Japanese. He doesn't want it. Who is he? It's my fucking husband, and he can die in hell. It's a disaster. I said, oh please, goodness, can you? I'm not sure how I'm gonna pay rent this month. Can you please do something for me? I'm like, okay, here's the money I earned doing things I didn't want to do. Are you doing No, I'm not doing I'm Christian, so I can't.
This would all change by April 2020. Following her era of drunken live streams and videos, Venus would continue to post on her YouTube channel, but it was clear that she was sad. She was dealing with what she had begun to accept was alcoholism, and she was experiencing depression. She stopped wearing bright colors and was pretty much exclusively wearing black and navy because it, and I quote, calmed her.
I prefer dark clothes. No why, but mostly because they calm me down. Wearing black or dark navy just makes me feel more calm.
And when asked what currently makes her happy and smile, Venus would start crying and say that nothing makes her smile, nothing makes her feel happy anymore, and that all she wants is for someone to pat her on the head.
What currently makes you happy and smile? Not currently, but I just want someone to pat my head.
During this time, Venus was in a relationship with a man called Ken, who, based on a series of posts she made in February of 2020, was financially abusive, controlled her money, and didn't care about her physical or mental health. She'd accuse him of behaving inappropriately around children and would announce her breakup from him on Instagram. 2 months later, Venus would post her first ever risque picture on Instagram before announcing that she had officially launched an OF. This caused major controversy. According to Venus, she had always wanted to do this. However, it was clear by the video that she was drunk.
I just spent an immense amount of time. So for the most part of my my childhood and youth, I was just thinking about plots.
Many of her more parasocial fans, who were young girls and women, were clearly upset that someone who they associated with cutesy, kawaii, and living doll aesthetics was now venturing into the world of adult content creation. However, I think a lot more people were genuinely concerned that Venus was doing this for all the wrong reasons. Firstly, she was clearly an alcoholic when she made this announcement and started posting topless and risque photos of herself. Secondly, everybody knew her childhood story, that Margaret had allegedly ruthlessly objectified her and treated her sexuality as some kind of sacred asset for the two of them. Thirdly, Venus had said during one of her drunken video posts that her mother was responsible for her developing a BDSM kink, and many people felt that this was therefore a traumatic response as opposed to a healthy, fully thought out and empowering choice.
My family cuckoo, verbal abuse, physical abuse. My stomach hurts me just like such a euphoria. Like I'm overcome with euphoria and relaxing, and it feels so good. Thanks to the physical abuse, I now have the BDSM kink. Thank you, Mom. The one whom we shall not name.
Fourthly, Venus had always had body image issues, and this had almost taken her life. She was now going into an industry where there is a hyperfixation on body image and fulfilling particular male-centered expectations of beauty. This did not seem at all healthy for someone in recovery. And finally, Venus would also reveal that she'd actually been fantasizing about doing adult content since she was in kindergarten. This was concerning, but also it didn't match up with things that she'd said through the years, such as not knowing what it was like to feel excited until she got married, or that her Christian upbringing meant that wasn't a topic or feature in her life at all. And now, suddenly, adult content was all she'd ever wanted since kindergarten. Venus was, in my unprofessional opinion, showing all the signs of someone diagnosed with BPD. She impulsively latched onto a new identity as an OF creator, and she clearly believed that this was her calling, the thing that would finally give her life the ultimate meaning, joy, and direction that she had been impulsively and relentlessly searching for since no longer being a living doll. She was in a cycle of feeling empty and unfulfilled, of being in unstable relationships with Manaki and Ken. She was impulsive. She engaged in self-destructive behaviors like drinking. This was not somebody who needed to start adult content creation. And I say this as somebody who is not at all puritanical about such things. Now, almost immediately, Venus became one of the top 0.5 creators on OF. And I'd argue that this was because she, in crude terms, was pretty much willing to do anything under the sun and looked miserable, malnourished, and underage during all of it. A lot of people speculated that she had a pimp. Some people even thought it was Manaki. But based on my research, I'd say that all the men who feature behind the scenes of her content were different men. She had a payment tier called Be My Cameraman for the Day, and I think that tells you everything you need to know about that. This controversy would blow up even further after Venus announced that she would be collaborating with fellow OF creator June Lovejoy. June Lovejoy was infamous for firstly being a white woman living in Japan, but mainly for her adult content, which I will sum up as urination. June, however, seemed very, very stable and very healthy and mature. She definitely seemed to know what she was getting into. Venus, however, appeared naive, ill, gaunt, and not at all like she was having a good or positive experience. It didn't feel like Venus was finding herself, in as much as she was finding a persona to replace the only one she'd ever known, being a living doll. This persona was also, according to many, putting her in danger. In one infamous and rare live stream, Venus, dressed as a maid, looked not only underfed and drunk, but clearly afraid of who many believed to be her manager off screen. Now, it's difficult to clearly hear what is said in the live stream, but some online translators believed that her manager in the background says, "Don't be sullen, unlikable, hurry up and do it," and is essentially displeased with Venus either being live or not doing a very good job. Venus seemingly fails to cooperate, which is then followed by what many people speculated to be a slapping or punching sound before the sound of kissing can be heard. During this time, Venus would upload quite infrequently to YouTube, focusing her content around promoting her adult content. And in her videos, people noticed that she was intoxicated. She would be shaking, and many people had begun to lose hope. But Venus would give her viewers a little hope when, a year later, in May 2021, she'd do a mental illness coming out video in which she'd speak openly about her ADHD diagnosis, her anxiety, and her depression. She'd make it known that she was in therapy and that this was helping her a lot. She'd talk about how, when she started doing something, she often couldn't stop, which explained why she couldn't stop drinking, for instance. She would disappear from the internet and post quite sporadically until finally coming back in mid-2022 with a "What I've Been Up To" video. She'd explained that she'd been away because she was consumed by her ED and alcoholism.
I was consumed by my and alcoholism, and It was not a fun time, no.
She'd say that a cause of her drinking was her dishonesty. That is, pretending that she was okay, happy and fulfilled online and to her friends when in fact she wasn't coping. She'd say that from now on, alcohol was no longer an option for her. She was excited to hopefully stop shaking, which many people had noticed. Shaking is a symptom of both alcoholism as well as the alcohol shakes one gets when withdrawing from alcohol. And this all gave her viewers a lot more hope. By October 2022, Venus would reveal that she'd been admitted into a Japanese psych ward and that she'd been an inpatient for over a month. This was for her alcoholism, something which again gave people hope that she was doing the right thing for her mental and physical health.
I've been inpatient for 1.5 months for a mood and alcoholism, very severe alcoholism.
She seemed to realize that she had a disease which she'd have to live with, manage, and introspect about for the rest of her life. And that is a huge step for anybody with an addiction to come to terms with. I think this really shows Venus's desire to get better, even to this day. But I don't think, even then, she had the resources, the people, or the foundation built from childhood to actualize her desire to get better. How can someone without a sense of identity, isolated and living in a foreign country, heavily medicated and trying to make the right decisions around a disease that helps them cope with trauma, with everything difficult, possibly do better? This is so sad, but in the process of doing my research, I could see where this was going before I knew. Within 2 months, it was clear that Venus was going downhill. She was still doing OF, she was shaking even more, and she was clearly drinking again. She claimed to be in recovery. However, by January 2023, she would acknowledge that she'd gone on a 3-day bender after she posted a fight that she'd had with her fiance. Yes, I was shocked too.
I was kind of sad and I thought I could just handle 1 glass of wine, but that kind of spiraled and that 1 glass turned into a 3-day bender, and I did some really stupid that I regret. So first of all, I had a fight with my fiancé and I posted the fight on Instagram, which is something I would normally not do. I was totally out of character because when I drink I turn kind of Mr. Jekyll and Dr. Hyde. It's like I have 2 personalities.
This very much represented a cycle at the time. Basically, Venus would see comments about her online. These comments would upset her. She'd drink as a result, and her Jekyll and Hyde personality would be activated and on full display. Once she drank, she'd destroy her real relationships with people and become a horrible person both in real life and online. She knew this of herself and would apologize for her self-destructive behavior and tendencies, hoping that this would lead to her genuine long-term recovery. She wanted to find another job, a job that didn't just involve social media, and was determined to stay in therapy and to keep fighting. Venus would post this video in January of 2023, and she'd post her final YouTube video in March 2023, a skincare video where she seemed highly medicated and just I actually started crying yesterday when I watched this video because it's just so tragic, it's so unfair, it's so cruel when you see people who from the beginning, irrespective of their efforts, just had no chance, which inadvertently leads us back to the source of everything. And a question that I am sure has played at least once on your mind: what happened to Margaret Palermo?
She would have gotten away with it if she would have told all the neighbors the same story, the same lie.
So, what happened to Margaret Palermo after Venus abandoned her and their career? Well, through the years, Margaret seems to have had a great deal of time to reflect and relay what she believed to be the childhood story of Venus Angelic. As I said, she tells a very different story about everything that transpired. According to her, when Venus was 15, she had begged Margaret to help her become like Becky Cruel. In the early 2000s, Becky Cruel was a YouTuber YouTuber who uploaded J-pop cover dances and eventually became so popular in Japan that she actually became an idol and best-selling Japanese pop star by the age of 16. Margaret claimed that after much begging, she finally gave into Venus's wishes and made it her priority to make her daughter's dreams come true. She brought her filming equipment, clothes, and bought out domains so that they could create the channel and brand of Venus Angelic. Margaret basically saw that Becky Cruel was managed by her father, and so she essentially became a manager to her daughter. She taught her how to do makeup and how to become like Becky Cruel. Margaret claims that during all the bullying Venus and her faced during the peak of their career, she moved for Venus's safety and worked full-time as her manager. According to Margaret, when Venus had everything she wanted, including a Japanese husband, she moved to Japan and stole everything from me, leaving her to die. According to Margaret, to this day, it was her who did everything for the channel. And the fact that Venus's channel is where it is now is evidence that Margaret did everything and is the true Venus Angelic. Margaret has survived the most impossible, and she believes that her good heart is an actual and disability. And I do really believe that Margaret believes this of herself and of how events have played out. Margaret, in Margaret's mind, is literally Venus Angelic, which is why dancing around in Venus's clothes makes perfect sense to her and isn't at all odd or inappropriate. Importantly, Margaret also claimed that Venus at least 2 people, her husband and a girl. And these accusations sparked yet again major controversy. For a long time, many people believed that Manaki had passed away, but this was all proved to be entirely false and entirely fabricated. But again, I think Margaret truly believes that everything she does and says is done in the overall and eventual interest of her daughter. Nobody and nothing can or will convince her otherwise. I think the trajectories of both Margaret and Venus's lives really demonstrates the consequences of being unhealed and having no resources for the healing process. I think both of these women, one of them then only a child, lived so much of their lives pursuing fame and external validation that neither had the introspective capacity needed to make better personal decisions. Venus was failed by Margaret, and Margaret appears to have been failed by her upbringing and inability to get help. And I think in this, we can see the saddening and traumatic outcomes of unbroken generational curses. Based on my analysis, the result of untreated mental health issues faced by both women is an incredibly sad thing to see and really results in the story taking yet another complete 180. Let's start with Margaret. Naturally, Margaret's reputation and career were no more after Venus essentially eloped with Manaki. Her online activity post-Venus Angelic can pretty much be summed up as bullying and harassing anyone who dared question her actions, threatening to unalive herself, and trying to either expose Venus or get her to come home. Margaret did go on a redemption tour of sorts, meeting with Xiao and apparently making amends and Margaret apologizing. Margaret got an apology as she made sure to inform us. The interim years were spent traveling across the world, not because Margaret had any money, but mainly in pursuit of various short-term boyfriends until her travel visas expired. Forums followed her from South Korea to Japan, to Switzerland, to Hungary, to London, and some. She mainly lived in hostels, was allegedly homeless and sleeping in cafes, spent much time clubbing in Seoul's red light district, and was seemingly dependent on her short-term partners and any money she could get selling memorabilia under the Venus Angelic name. This was also when she started re-uploading Venus's videos to her own YouTube channel to generate ad revenue for herself. She tried marketing herself on Craigslist as a one-on-one language teacher, an out-call masseuse in South Korea, and a web designer. She'd also reach out to other YouTubers offering to manage them. Okay. Margaret also posted many pictures of herself throughout the years, mimicking her daughter's poses in what many speculate was an attempt to get Venus's attention, as well as to rage bait attention to her social media. There was a major debacle around Margaret's antics at the time, especially when she tried to sell locks of Venus's hair and her baby teeth. I am questioning my sanity in making this video. And although this was all highly interesting, entertaining, and bizarre for many following the trials and tribulations of Margaret Palermo, nothing terribly exceptional was happening. That is until Margaret announced that she was married in November of 2022 and was now living in the United States of America with her new husband, Colby. She was now living on the open road, traveling across the state of Florida with her truck-driving prince. Or at least that's what she presented on social media. The world heaved a sigh of relief and thought, finally, Margaret has found peace, happiness, a meal ticket, and is leaving Venus alone. One thing you might have noticed about Margaret Palermo in seeing pictures of her over the years is that her appearance changes rather dramatically. And as far as I can tell, in my opinion, these physical transformations always correlate to who is her best meal ticket. When Venus was her meal ticket, Margaret tried to emulate being a living doll, being an influencer, being in kawaii and Japanese culture. She fully committed herself to being Venus's manager. There was a lengthy period in which Margaret had her hair dreadlocked and got very into Jamaican culture. This physical transformation corresponded with when she was in a relationship with a Jamaican man. You will also notice that when she married Colby, the Floridian truck driver, her look became very female trucker adjacent. Although Margaret's Instagram made married life look like a dream in the alligator capital of the world, life on the road is incredibly stressful, and for most people, it is no luxury. Margaret would eventually start uploading videos of Colby being verbally to her. But in these Exposé videos, he can also be heard accusing her of doing the same thing. In one video, he'd yell that he was sick of her bringing up that she had an IQ of 154, something which, if you remember, Venus had already brought up when her mother tried to blackmail her into sending her $3,000 a month. Colby would abandon her on the road to teach her a lesson, and she would soon file for divorce. In court, it was revealed that Colby had a history of domestic According to Margaret, after divorce proceedings, he would call her a psychopath and a scammer. Irrespective of my opinions on Margaret and her many issues, I am glad that she got a divorce, and if I had witnessed it at the time, I would have wished her therapy, healing, and time offline to introspect and become a better person. But of course, she would instead rebrand as a #survivor. I can drink beer with a Yakuza boss. I can live fine anywhere in the world. I find work everywhere, have no addictions, and no criminal record. I received many proposals in my life. Some men get obsessed over me, and I would have been happy to stay married, but some people take my kindness for weakness. As I said, drinking and yelling are choices. Arguing unethically is a choice. Being manipulative won't cut it. I wasn't born yesterday. I still fell for all the wonderful love bombing and not knowing the US, so yeah, I'm also not perfect, and of course, I wanted to be happy, and it was a tough inner battle to let a marriage and relationship go. We all know that many men harm women based on refusal. Some women are unalived because men won't take no for an answer. #aggressive, #men, #staying single, #cat lady, #Yakuza, #Japan, #fundoshi. I just love how she hashtagged fundoshi. Now, Margaret's divorce from Colby would be finalized by the beginning of 2024, and nobody would hear much from her aside from the occasional photoshopped Instagram photo or updates on how much of a betrayer and liar Venus was. But this would all change in July of 2024. On July 21st, 2024, a woman by the name of Laurel Lee Bay was arrested in Queens, New York for illegally squatting. Laurel Lee Bay had her things moved into the property and appeared to have hired a moving van to do so. Laurel Lee Bay essentially found out about this vacant property by sleuthing online and discovering that the original owner had recently passed away, which left the property empty and uninhabited. Now, if it isn't obvious, Laurel Lee Bay is in fact Margaret Palermo.
Laurel Bay covering her face from our camera while leaving court. Her appearance Wednesday answering to criminal trespass charges after being arrested at this Howard Beach home twice in July.
Can you tell us why you were there? Do you have anything to say?
No comment.
Bay was quiet at court, but neighbors argue she had plenty to say when approached at the long vacant 99th Street home.
Margaret had her name legally changed in August of 2023. She had allegedly illegally trespassed and squatted at least once before in a vacant property in Kentucky. And when she was there, she kept a journal, which basically exposed her as a conspiracy theorist and at least a delver into the highly controversial new religious movement of German heathenism.
Neighbors say they saw Bay moving belongings into the home, but her reasons for being there weren't adding up.
She would have gotten away with it if she would have told all the neighbors the same story, the same lie.
According to the criminal complaint, police saw Bay come out of the house and she allegedly told an officer she did research and nobody lives in the home. An order of protection was issued in court. A judge says Bay cannot contact witnesses or return to the residence. The home has also been locked up while Holmes figures out what's next.
Now, Laurel Lee Bay's life since mid-2024 has been pretty much identical to Margaret Palermo's life during the interim years. Now that Colby isn't her life, posting about Venus has once again become her preoccupation. She has made it known that Venus started to unravel not with her, that is not with Margaret, but since leaving Margaret for Manaki, which based on Margaret's logic means that she isn't to blame. The mirror hasn't been cracked for a while, and it was my hard work and love that kept it together and hidden. Venus had gold, unconditional love, protection, beauty, and possibility, and she traded it for a cheap illusion that flattered her fantasy. That's what breaks the heart, that she chose it, eyes half open, and burned the bridge behind her. It's not just a betrayal, it's an insult to everything I have done, everything I have built and sacrificed. I poured my love into her, and she handed it to people who saw her as disposable, monetizable, or a trophy. Hashtag boundaries. Margaret would also create this appropriate piece of art in the name of hashtag boundaries. Currently, Margaret's whereabouts in the world are unknown. Apparently, she's currently working as a supervisor in Manhattan, but one thing about Margaret Palermo is that you never ever know. According to her, since May, she's decided to stop reaching out to Venus altogether, claiming that, and I quote, "I gave up my own life streams to fulfill yours. Your actions have consequences. You have hurt me beyond repair. I cannot erase the past, but I can protect myself from more harm. You made your choices. Now I'm making mine. I release you from any obligation to me, and I release myself from any responsibility toward you." Now, just in case Margaret ignored what I said at the very beginning of this video and is watching this video, do not bother emailing me, contacting me, threatening me or my team. Go well, because clearly Margaret is feeling vindicated, which is apparently all she's ever wanted. And this vindication has everything to do with what we are going to conclude this video with, namely, what at this point in time has happened to Venus Angelic.
Your ass. Hey, you come from South Africa? You stupid ass. You punch. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
Now, although Venus hasn't posted on YouTube since the beginning of 2023, she has now and again been posting on Instagram. And in 2024, she'd claim that the reason she wasn't posting on YouTube is because she no longer has access to her YouTube channel. 2024 was essentially a year in which Venus started posting incessantly on X or Twitter, and it was assumed and seemingly confirmed by Venus that she was not only living off alcohol but also into hard drugs. She would also post incessantly on the Venus Angelic Discord server, where her last remaining fans tried to help her virtually. There was a period of 7 days in which she essentially harassed these fans, mocking them for things like their deceased relatives, which as a result saw the Discord nuked. Venus was saying a lot of wild, derogatory and horrible things online during this time, but was simultaneously asking for help. She'd then spiral into more vitriol, hatred, and harassment when she didn't receive the help she seemingly wanted, namely money to feed her and attention. Her fans and those following her were therefore in a bind. They couldn't believe anything Venus said because of her tendency to now lie online for shock value and attention. However, it was clear that the reason she was lying and seeking attention had everything to do with her being unwell, potentially being exploited, and spiraling into her addictions. For a time, it was known that Venus was homeless in Japan. However, by February of this year, it was confirmed that she was back where she started. She had been deported and was in Switzerland. She was admitted into a Swiss hospital by March of this year, but had, according to a post she made on Reddit, snuck out and went on a bender. She would incessantly post about this bender on the Venus Angelic subreddit before being banned. In August, she'd also begun posting sporadic videos of herself on Instagram, which showed her day drinking, drunk, and clearly not in hospital or in recovery. She's seemingly living in squalor in an alleged house and is dependent on Cash App donations, Swiss welfare, and allegedly on extended Swiss family members. Although I don't know how viable this is, considering that Venus's father, by dint of ignoring his daughter being as terrible a parent as Margaret in my opinion, when she posts nonsensically, and everybody online is pretty much in consensus that she is currently at rock bottom.
Hey guys, it's Venus.
I can't say that I exactly know how to end this video. I usually like to have quite a clear, assertive, and obvious message of how, against all the odds, everything will be alright. Everything will and does get better, and this subject matter that I'm talking about is an example of that. The story of Venus Angelic doesn't provide us with that clear and obvious message, that hopeful, optimistic conclusion which makes it all worthwhile in the end. But I do have hope for Venus. I do have a grain of hope for Venus, and I believe in her. And the reason I have hope, the reason I have belief, is because she has shown evidence time and time again that she knows that she makes the wrong decisions, that she's self-destructive, that she needs help. That's the first step and the hardest step. And I think she has the potential to believe that and hopefully see that everything that comes after that, all the therapy, all the withdrawal symptoms, all the lows and all the fear, is worth it for what comes after. I sincerely hope that Venus begins to believe in herself, because my research made it abundantly clear that hundreds of thousands of people across the world believe in her and wish her nothing but the best moving forward. Thank you so much for watching this deep dive. Please let me know if you've ever watched or heard of Venus Angelic and what her content meant to you, what this makes you think, your opinions and perspectives. There was so much that I wished I could have included in this video, but this video is already probably over 2 hours long, and I have a 3-hour-long class tomorrow where I am expected to talk in public. My Gen Z anti-sociality cannot comprehend it. If you made it this far, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I researched, recorded, and edited this all myself, so please let me know how you found this video. Let me know what I can improve on, and do let me know who you'd like me to cover next. Also, don't forget to subscribe and remember to leave your thoughts down below. And I also cannot believe it, because I have such terrible imposter syndrome that I do not look at my analytics. But you, yes you, have helped me reach 300k subscribers. I never thought in my wildest dreams that I'd have 300k subscribers on YouTube, and I cannot thank you enough for the immense, and I mean immense, support you've all been showing me these past few months on my videos. You have all, in all seriousness, changed my life in ways that I cannot publicly get into, but that I am eternally grateful for and am not worthy of. Thank you so very much, brethren, and I would like to dedicate this video to Venus's recovery. And I'll see all of you very soon in the next one.